Welcome, everyone. This is our podcast that we have. My name is Harris Bider, founder and Chief Executive of the Forward Institute. I'll ask Lauren to introduce herself.
I'm Lauren Thompson, founder of Roots and Futures, connecting markets, governments and communities in the East Midlands.
And I'm very proud to welcome my friend of decades, the great John Reid, who's the founder of Clean Up Britain, as well as being the consummate campaigner across politics and public policy for a number of years. John, welcome so much.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Great to be here with you both. Thank you very much.
John Reid, someone who I've proud to have called my friend since we were at my first week at Warwick University when we met on the politics degree. And who would have thought all these years on we'd be doing this?
I know. You'd think we'd have grown up by now.
We never grow up. It's a real pleasure. Thank you for coming to Birmingham on it. John, you've done many, many things in your working career across all different sectors, and we'll explore that and explore really pressing issues, both within the East and West Midlands, but nationally as well. Let's start by talking about what you're doing now, which is the campaign, Clean Up Britain. Just tell me about how that came along, what you're trying to do, the impact that you're having, some of the challenges too, and particularly if there's any of those campaigns that run across the Midlands, that would be really great, because Laurie and I are obviously focused on place-based initiatives in Birmingham and the East Midlands, myself with Forward and Lauren with Roots and Futures. But Clean Up Britain, I've heard a lot about it, but straight from the horse's mouth.
Straight from the very old knackered horse's mouth.
I think you've been very good, because you've not started with the Warwick student day, heady days of...
Yeah, there's going to be lots of people watching this, and some of them may be close to us, so we'll leave that.
They may know us from Warwick.
Yeah, absolutely.
God, that's a long time ago, wasn't it? Great years as well.
Fantastic years.
Very, very great years, and I think a lot to be pleased about what happened, haven't we? All know that.
Absolutely.
So, as you say, I'm long in the tooth, Harris, and done quite a few things one way or another. A lot of stripes on my back, and excuse me if there's too much cynicism and whatever about what I say. I'll try and limit that as much as possible. But short answer to your question really is that, I set up Clean Up Britain in 2010. I'd been away in South Africa, been living there for a bit, but I've been traveling around Africa quite a bit one way or another. And when I came back here, I had this sort of apocryphal sort of event where I was driving down from Edinburgh to London with my wife, and I didn't see 100 metres of road that didn't have litter on it. And it was the first time I'd really noticed it. And it's 400 miles literally from Princes Street in the centre of Edinburgh to Oxford Street in the centre of London, literally. And I was just whinging on really about saying, I just can't believe how antisocial, selfish people are in this country. Because it is a selfish act, really, littering. It's sort of, it's a crime, believe it or not. It's actually a criminal offence in this country. You wouldn't believe it, but it is. But it's an offence unlike others, whereby essentially you're inflicting it on the whole of society. Most crimes are one-on-one, aren't they? So if I bash into you, I don't ever steal your car, it's just your car. Or if I break into your house, Lauren, it's your house. But this is a crime that's inflicted on the whole of society, really, to have to deal with and to be lumbered with. Anyway, so I was going on about it, and my wife just said, look, I think we got to about Newcastle upon Tyne, something like that. And she said, instead of whinging on about it, why don't you actually do something about it? You've got the experience, the contacts, da-da-da. So by the time I got to London, I thought, I'm going to have a go at this. So that's sort of how it was born, really. And I just set up Clean Up Britain then. And it's just a CIC, a community interest company. Deliberately didn't want to be a charity, because I want to be able to be provocative and have a go at politicians, which I do on a regular basis from all sides of the political spectrum. So, but also give them credit where credit's due, which is not very often. We're a service CIC, and we have a very, very clear mission, which just is to in one sentence, it's to try and change the attitudes and behaviour of the 20 million plus people in this country who admit to littering, which is 30% of the population.
And they actually admit to
That's it,
the littering.
So you can imagine if they're admitting to it, there's actually more than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's a social sort of reticence about selling some pollster.
So is it just lazy, careless? I can't understand that concept, just because some of it's quite deliberate. Like if you take something like fly tipping, that is making a conscious effort that you're going to put a fridge, a mattress in the back of your car, drive out to somewhere in the sticks usually, just go, right, I'm going to unload my car, not my problem anymore. And then it's handing it over to, I don't know, the taxpayer or the farmer, isn't it? Because if it's on private land, I think they own the disposal as well.
They do.
And it's across all communities, all sectors. So you can't say this is a problem within this group or that group, but it's across everyone.
It's across all demographics, really, in terms of age, education, sex, religion, everything, really. And it would be, wouldn't it, with 20 million people? You know, that's such a huge section of society. But there are particular elements, and I'm going to call them out, that are worse than others. And I'm going to call them out partly because it reflects badly on me, whatever. So they tend to be young white males.
Young white males?
Yeah, they tend to be between, the worst single segment is between of people who litter. Sorry, I'm going to distinguish between littering and fly tipping because they're two different sides of the same coin. Because many people do fly tipping for commercial gain. You know, serious organised crime down to white phone man. But what I'm talking about is the people who just casually chuck stuff out. So everything from, they go to Costa and they've had their coffee and they just chuck their thing on the ground. Or they've been to McDonald's, they have their drive-through. It takes roughly 12 minutes at 50 miles an hour, going about 8 miles for people to finish their Whopper and fries and Coke, and it goes out the window. And it tends to be younger males between about 14 and 26. And so it's sort of it's boys pretending to be men. It's sort of adolescents, you know, and it's young boy racer type things. And I'm exaggerating to make a point, if you like, but that is the single worst segment. And you're going to like this. Men are 3 times worse than women when it comes to littering. You see,
I find that really quite interesting because if I look on my social medias, for example, and I follow, the trend at the moment, which is, people going out and picking the litter and then creating a community following behind them, which I think is absolutely brilliant. And there's 2 places that always seem to come up, which is really sort of Birmingham at the moment in terms of, and I wouldn't say actually it's where white young males are living, and also Leicestershire, because somebody I follow there is from, different communities from,
And Leicester's one of the most diverse cities in the country. And that was my point, actually, John, which is fascinating in terms of demographics about young white males. But when you think about the narratives recently about litter, there's one city that comes up, and it's a city that we're in at the moment.
I think we're sitting in it, aren't we?
In this podcast, Birmingham.
Yeah.
Now, I know from speaking with you and also stuff that you put out for the campaign, they have a lot to say about Birmingham. There's been a bin strike and it's supposed to be resolved. Birmingham, as Lauren was saying, is one of the most diverse cities in Europe. And it's one of the youngest cities in Europe. So perhaps in terms of your demographic, there's something there. But is Birmingham had a bad rap with the media, or are there fundamental problems in Birmingham around littering?
God, that's a big question. And look, I've picked out the one worst demographic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But actually, that doesn't include. There are a lot of young white, non-white males who are doing it as well. Yeah, I've got to be clear about that. It goes across all spectrums.
Yes.
Yeah, it goes across,
absolutely.
Goes across all spectrums. And male and female, but it just happens, men, boys tend to be much worse. And there are complicated reasons for that. But I think in terms of Birmingham, you know better than I do. I mean, the bin strike has really, really compounded the issue in Birmingham, hasn't it? I mean, when you've got a strike going on for the best part of a year, we've all seen the images. It's terrible for this city. absolutely appalling. And really just the fact that as well, in a year, the council haven't been able to come to an agreement with the unions. It just seems a huge amount. I don't know the ins and outs. Maybe you, particularly Harris, and maybe you, Lauren, know the ins and outs as well. But it seems to be a relatively small number of people affected, worried about terms and conditions, all the rest of it. But they haven't been able to negotiate a settlement in over a year, which it just seems mind-blowing. And it'd be interesting now, especially to ask you really, because of course after last Thursday, or the recent, elections, the Labour Party is no longer in control here, is it?
Well, I think it's really interesting around that because, let me connect the bin strike with the lack of trust in institutions that are designed to support and provide services to communities, because I think the two are related. And this is not a party political point at all. And it's been well documented in the press. The fundamental remit of any local authority is to do a number of things. One of them is to collect the bins on time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, people will see it really quickly because rubbish will pile up in the streets. And in some neighbourhoods more than others for lots of different reasons. And therefore, the results that we've seen at this cycle of elections and before is fundamentally the voters are saying, if you can't collect my bins, why should we vote for you or re-elect you? And I think and also it feeds into bigger issues around trust in the council, in politicians, but then it spreads around system-wide issues. So the council's rubbish, yeah? Then schools are rubbish, hospitals are rubbish, nothing's working in a system. And that may or may not be correct because there are obviously there's some amazing schools in Birmingham. There's some amazing hospitals in Birmingham too. But the collateral and corrosive effect that impacts on place is devastating. And of course, with social media, then that gets transmitted across the world. I've had friends in the United States. So they've had these images of rubbish being piled up on the streets, saying to me, what's happening in Birmingham? Yeah. Why can't you collect the rubbish? The Daily Mail is reporting that there's rats as big as cats going rummaging rubbish and marauding the streets.
Yeah.
And it paints this picture of a dystopian city that is dysfunctional and failing.
Yeah.
And that is not the case because there's so many great things happening in the city. But unless we've fundamentally addressed the challenges, so your campaign, that's why your campaign is so important. And my goodness, it's been going for 15 years now. You've had so much traction on it because you animate the issues. And I've known you such a long time. You're like amazing campaigner. You're well connected. You get things done. But I mean, going back to the campaign, it's been going for 15 years now. There must have been highs and lows on that. What would you, looking back at that time, what would you say has been the real breakthroughs of the campaign?
There are highs and lows. I mean, I'll take the lows first then.
Yeah.
I mean, 15 years is quite a long time to be going. And I spent 14 years banging my head against the wall with the previous administration. Nationally, sorry. Yeah. With the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
Who just wouldn't see the importance of this issue. And they just wouldn't. And even though I was trying to point out, look, I think this has been in your own electoral interest. Because I don't know about the two of you, I just think now, in my lifetime, there's never been a sort of political terrain which, in the way we've got now, where so many voters have detached themselves from allegiance to one of the former two big parties.
Yeah.
You know, that phrase, when you're going, oh, we've always voted Labour. Oh, we've always voted Conservative, you know, and that was the case for many people. And you could put a pig up in Surrey South and he would get elected with a blue rosette and he'd be a Conservative. And you could put a goat in Blaenau Gwent and it would be elected as a Labour MP. Mm. We've now seen in the recent elections that there's been a complete fraying of political loyalties. And I think that's partly because people are, people are much less tribal. People generally, not the political classes, which might include people like us as well, who are hugely interested in politics,
Political nerds.
Political
absolutely.
nerds.
Yeah.
But the average man and woman in the street, they want competency, I think. Yeah. And they want to live in nice environments. And actually, that's one of the reasons why what success we've had with Clean Up Britain is because I think there are sort of foresighted politicians who can actually see that this is a non-party political issue. Clean Up Britain is very simple. It is not about ideology or anything. It's about creating and sustaining a clean and pleasant environment to live in. We have a beautiful country here. We just absolutely do. All over the country. You're in the East Midlands, from Robin Hood Forest and everything.
No,
all over the country.
I'm finding this really interesting because there's something here about civic pride for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
And if I sort of relate this conversation, so you've done a really excellent sort of show and tell of the A38 and, where I live, which is just atrociously covered in trash, rubbish. And I dread to think what's happening.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, it's been covered in the Daily Mail again today.
Has it? Well, I just think of
because I've just been speaking to them. They just rang me about it. It's the sore that will never get better.
No, it won't. But also, you think the impact on nature, because you think the land that sits alongside roads actually has got quite a lot of wildlife in and so forth.
Of course,
because it's never disrupted.
Yeah.
But the bit that sort of, in terms of if I think about what the councils have been doing, they have put the budget aside to do the cleaning of the picking up of the litter alongside the roads. And I live near the A50. And sort of in winter, when it's easier to do the picking because there's no leaves on trees and you can actually see the rubbish, they'll close off a lane. Fantastic. So the traffic can still keep moving, bit of health and safety. But it is literally two people that spend a couple of hours trying to make a dent. And I keep saying, actually, it'd be great if they told the community, because actually I think even like the church vicar would be like, right, my congregation, please go down and pick litter alongside the roads because it is so, so bad. And I keep thinking about what are the solutions, because I know if I speak to anybody who does, collects the bins or looks after, mows the grass, looks after the sort of places themselves, their pride is immense. Yeah. They want to do a good job and they want to be out on the roads and come rain, shine, snow. And I can't work out if it's just capital, is it the politics that's sort of crunching up the system, red tape? Why is it only two people trying to tackle this? Not hundreds or even 10, it's that.
Yeah, well, it's because, just echoing Lauren's point, because I'm really pleased that you connected litter to the environment, because the environment, there's so much interest in the environment and wildlife and not trashing the planet on a global level, but at a local level, to whenever I go to feel really fortunate I have access to some of the best parks in Birmingham. But when I go to the parks, it's full of people, particularly on a sunny day, but not on a sunny day, just enjoying the park, just enjoying it and enjoying the trees, wildlife. So, and it really warms my heart when I see that. All sorts of different people in Birmingham. So given that people are concerned about the environment, it's very high profile. Why do you think there's two people in where Lauren lives who are with their litter pickers picking it up and not hundreds? I mean, obviously there's lots of reasons why, but how can we develop a mass campaign, a grassroots campaign that can help the great work that you've been doing, John?
I don't know if those two people, are they from the council, presumably?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, they're from the council. So, I mean, of course, it is, you saying earlier, Harris, it's the council's responsibility to pick up litter, if you like. That's one of their statutory responsibilities. But of course, and they will all say this, they've had huge cuts and all the rest of it, et cetera, and they just haven't got the workforce to do it. But the thing is, look, I'm going to be very blunt about this.
No, you never.
I know, sorry, or whatever, yeah. You were hoping for a very bland anodyne sort of discussion.
We're hoping for the opposite.
Well, so this will probably stir a few people up, really, either rightly or wrongly and everything. But look, at the end of the day, There are a large number of people in this country, who are antisocial, lazy and ignorant. Those aren't words you're ever going to hear from a government minister or an opposition minister, certainly not from the civil service or anything, but you're going to hear it from a campaigner who tells the truth. Yeah. There are a lot of people like that. They just don't care. It's selfishness. And there are, unfortunately, they are screwing it up. They're making things bad for the rest of us. And there's only two solutions. One really is, they need education and they need punishment. It's as simple as that. Because a lot of them are beyond education. They don't care. They don't care about a lot of things in this life. And they certainly don't care about littering. But if we go on, actually, it's funny listening to Harris, and I hear what he's saying. And he's absolutely right. You know, people often, and this is just a ridiculous sort of conundrum, but it exists, is that a lot of families, they'll go to beautiful areas. It could be the Peak District near you. Yeah. Or a beautiful park in Edgbaston or wherever in Birmingham. Yeah. And they'll have a lovely day out and everything. And I guarantee, if I go with you next time, I guarantee you take some footage or I'll take some footage. When that park empties, there will be crap everywhere. So tell me how, from a behavioural, psychological point of view, how do you marry these up? So people go there presumably because they want to have a nice time. Yeah. Nice bit of grass, lie around, eat something, drink something, socialise, listen to music. They go there because it's a nice place to be. Yeah. But when they decamp back to where they've come from, they trash the place. Yeah. But they wouldn't have gone there in the first place if it had been looking like that, looking like they've left it, i.e. trashed. So there's a complete emotional disconnect there between what they're looking for and actually, but they somehow can't see that they're part of the problem, that it's somehow all right. They've had their picnic, they've leaving their zillions, and they usually are, Red Bull cans. They're absolutely appalling. Terrible brand. Hope somebody's listening who might be from Red Bull. You know, they honestly, I mean, you probably know their slogan, Red Bull has wings. I honestly think they've swallowed their own propaganda. Because they think their cans have got wings. And they're just going to pick themselves up and put it in a bin, And we've been doing ongoing research, but we reckon there's at least 25 million cans, at least, more like 95 million, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, that are littered in Britain every year by their customers. They do nothing about it, but it's by their customers. They do absolutely zilch about it. So the point I'm making is that lovely part you were talking about there, it'll be left trashed. And I guarantee this summer, and maybe both of you have a little wry smile when it happens, and you'll see it in the Daily Mail and the Daily Mirror and the Sun and everything, whatever. There'll be something like Bournemouth or Brighton Beach. I'll call those two out, It'll be a nice sunny day. Somebody will take it. It'll be trashed. So we've got a real problem. People don't. So they're being selfish. They're being ignorant, and they are literally polluting the environment. And let's call it out for what it is.
So you said that there's only two ways you can deal with it: either education and punishment. Education, you can do that through schools and other campaigns. Punishment.
Yeah.
So how would you punish people? How would you punish corporates and businesses?
Okay. So look, at the end of the day, let's just boil it down to its most simple essence. Litter, and I challenge your viewers, listeners, to when they go out next, just have a look round. They'll see there's litter everywhere. It doesn't matter where they are in the country, they'll see it. Although at this time of year, we're filming this in May. Actually, it's probably the best time of year for litter because the foliage is all growing and it's been covered up. So whatever Britain looked like now, which is bad, it's the best it's ever going to look like. It's the best it'll ever look like, Come October, November, December, the autumn, and everything dies back, as you were saying earlier, really, with the sort of different changing seasons. It's all died back on the A38 and the A50, It'll all be there, sitting there for the umpteenth year, and you'll be there in all its glory. So whatever it looks like now is the best it'll ever look like. But it's human beings who have put it there. It actually isn't the brands. Although, having said that, I don't want for 1 second to excuse the brands from their corporate social responsibility. You two are both very, very aware of CSR and ESG and all the rest, at least, but for so many companies. Look, and I'm not a Marxist, as Harris knows, but it's greenwashing. They're absolute greenwashing. They're something to put on their website and put a tick next to and tell the officials from the Cabinet Office or whatever, oh, but we're doing this. Oh, no, but we're doing that. Oh, we've got it under control.
I mean, I can get drawn into procurement all day. That's a geek subject of mine, because I think it's an absolute privilege that if you're a contract manager and you can actually divert some funding to social causes, that's a real privilege, let alone sort of being a civil servant or public servant. But actually, I really want to pick up on, going back to the sort of Red Bull and actually the state of the economy and so forth. And we actually worked on a really nice piece recently, which is working with a corporate on that sort of social responsibility. They've said that they wanted to spend some money on their sort of, I think it's a fine. What do we do on that social side? Where do we go? And actually, Johnny, you've put together a brilliant proposal, which is doing that educational piece, which is sort of raising awareness of having the public collect litter, working with a fantastic organisation called Future Makers, which then comes in and sort of recycles plastic. They want to do more. They can't, because it's cheaper to send containers of plastic to China or India or wherever. And actually then over time going to work with using the sort of the waste from the local area to commission a piece of art. And that's a bit in terms of, we know the economy at the moment, it's ballooning. What is it? I think there's the stats I think we've all talked about in terms of the welfare states costing more than the income tax. But actually, I'm seeing, and you're not the only person that's come and said, actually, I want to work with organisations and do that corporate social responsibility bit with some actual action and do. I am seeing corporates lean in a lot more. They just don't want to be paying what they see as more tax to the government. And
I mean, there's so many different ways you can address this issue around education and punishment. The interesting thing, though, John, is that if you look at voting patterns, and we'll go on to politics in a minute, because I'm really interested in how you clean up the country as you've done with your campaign, which has been brilliant. But also, I know you have very interesting and views and reflections in terms of cleaning up politics as well. We come on to that in a second. But as a segue into that, so young people now, you can go up to the United Nations definition of young people to the age of 35, but older than that. If you look at voting patterns, and I know it's not a direct correlation in terms of environment, but the most popular party amongst young people, by far, are the Greens. And that is, if you look at the data, the evidence, that is very apparent across all spaces. And you've said that young people and young males across groups are the ones, in a sense, the worst culprits. Others as well.
The worst culprits, not exclusively them.
Not exclusively. So is there some hope there in terms of greater interest, particularly amongst the young, but across all groups, in terms of the environment, around nature, around protecting wildlife, all that sort of stuff? In terms of what you're doing, in terms of tapping into that zeitgeist, so to speak? Or is that romantic thinking?
You know what? I'm just going to relay a little anecdote here, because another campaign I run, I think you know, Harris, is campaign to ban trophy hunting.
Right.
Which is a odious practice of these people who've got far too much money and far too little social conscience, and go to Africa, South Africa particularly, and slaughter very rare animals, from elephants to lions and goodness knows whatever. So I'm heavily involved in running that as well. And through that, I was having a conversation, without meaning to name drop or whatever, with Sir Ranulph Fiennes, who's heavily one of our supporters. And he said, and he won't mind me saying this publicly, we were talking about, one or two things. When we were talking about the environment, he was asking me about Clean Up Britain and stuff like that. And I was just saying, what's your thoughts then? I said, it's very strange, isn't it? Because we do feel that it tends to be the younger demographic that is causing a lot of this problem. It's not your 83-year-olds from Solihull or Derby It tends to be not, yeah? It tends not to be, yeah? I mean, I'm exaggerating. And to be honest, when's the last time, you went through McDonald's drive-through and you saw your average 83-year-old Mr. and Mrs. in the car? It doesn't tend to be, does it?
No.
We know the demographics, so do McDonald's.
Yes.
And all that. They know exactly. So do Red Bull. And you just need to look at these brands and look at the demographics of who produces them. Yeah. So you get a very clear cue. Of course, a lot of people don't want to say, don't be nasty to young people. No, let's just tell the truth. Let's just tell the truth, right? And the truth is, I think, as Ranulph Fiennes said to me, he said, and it's very interesting, 50% of young people want to save the world. 50% don't give a shit. Sorry, he didn't use that word shit.
He doesn't mind you saying it.
He didn't use that word, actually. That was me just for sort of poetic license. Yeah, sorry about that. But you see the point he's making.
Yes.
You say you can't say every single young person in the world is running up and down Birmingham High Street, with a green rosette on saying, whatever. Yeah.
But that's how it works with politics, though, isn't it? Because when you look at marches and things like that through the centre of London, they don't look at it, 1 million people have turned up to march against whatever cause they happen to be marching against. Politicians always look at the flip side, which is, well, that's 65 million that couldn't be bothered or asked about it. Yeah. But I mean, I've got a little confession here. So I can remember when I was a teenager, I was at a bus stop one day.
Only a couple of years ago.
A couple of years ago. And I mean, God, this is how long ago it was, because I was smoking at the time, and which now you can't. I mean, my son's at the age where he will never be able to buy a vape or a cigarette, because that's how much the law has changed in terms of bans. Yeah. And I can remember having my cigarette and getting my packet and throwing it on the floor. And this woman sat next to me. She goes, I know, I shouldn't. It's a real confession.
This is a real Catholic confessional.
It is. I smoked and also, I know.
Punishment for you later, I think.
But this comes back to the older generations and the point that you're making, because the woman sat next to me, challenged me there and then and went, are you going to pick it up? Me being a teenager, being quite smart, and I'd just moved out my parents' home, just went, well, I pay my council tax. That's somebody will come and pick it up for me. And she was like, no, you go pick that up, put it in the bin. And fair enough. And actually,
good on her.
And it's, for me, I start thinking about, well, what's that social contract in terms of
that's a really good point.
Challenge.
Yeah.
But also, I can always remember there was a Keep Britain Tidy campaign, or there was always a public service campaign about, is this going, you can say it's you. But again, or you don't. But
is that the older generations. The government's just withdrawn their support from, as it has, I'm pleased to say, yeah.
Oh, well, I do.
Because of the links with the tobacco industry. But yes, you're right.
But also, people are closer to things around coming out of a lot of trials and tribulations, and the generation took more pride in the community. That's what I was getting to.
But I think you've touched on a really important point there, Lauren, in terms of that anecdote. I've got another anecdote, but this time it's like in New York City. My son, who I love deeply, and he's a wonderful human being, he used to smoke, right? And he told me this story. He was in, I think, the Upper West Side, having a cigarette, and he thought he flicked his cigarette in the bin. Lo and behold, Marc Jacobs, the designer, walks by, sees my son inadvertently trying to flick it into the bin. It landed on the pavement, and he looked at my son and said, "I want you to put that in the bin." Yeah, so very similar to the older woman at the bus stop.
And well done for him identifying Marc Jacobs as well.
Yeah,
Marc Jacobs. Like New York.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that thing about the social contract, because would we challenge someone that we saw was recklessly littering, their cigarette or chucking their McDonald's package or whatever? I think now I would. And I have done. And I hate it. I hate the indiscriminate, wanton littering of my neighborhood, my city. I hate it. I hate seeing the litter there. It actually deflates your pride in your place. Mm-hmm. And I think my views and your views and John's views are pretty mainstream. Most people will hate the sight of people littering. Would they challenge someone? I don't know. But I think for it to be really successful in terms of the environment, protecting the environment in the way that John's campaign has done, it's about all of us, because we can't rely on the state to do it, because the state, you and I have had so many conversations about it. There's not enough money in the system for a bin operative or people to clear it, because as John was saying, it's just like this endless problem. So you tidy, pick up the litter, and next week it's the same thing.
It absolutely is. And my sort of little one-liner on that is saying that litter picking is a fantastic thing that a lot of people do all over the country, because that's their way of doing something about it. But actually, and I don't mean this to be denigratory in any way, but it's just the reality. I liken it to, it's a little bit like trying to mop up the kitchen floor while the taps are still running. Yeah, you'll be doing it forever and ever and ever. And what our campaign's about, what Clean Up Britain's campaign about, is turning those taps off. Turning them off, so that the tens and hundreds of thousands of people, as it is in this country, who go out litter picking, and it literally is that big. There are hundreds of groups. You go onto the internet, you'll see there's hundreds of these groups all over the country, and they go out, rain and shine, whenever, and they give their time free, and they do it, and they really care. Which is what I was saying about this is sort of an issue that really matters to a lot of people. It's about place and about having civic pride in where you live. And a lot of people, a lot of good friends, people like Harris said to me, being a political person, having run 20 odd major national, international campaigns, most of them nothing to do like this, some of them pretty hard edged, say, why are you doing that? And the answer is because I think the trouble is littering and bad behaviour like that and fly tipping is symbolic and of wider social issues about people not caring, not showing respect, not showing pride in the place they live and the country they live in. And I think that's why so many people now are just, losing faith and pride, not only in the state, but our country. And it's very sad to see that.
And I think for me, that's a really good segue into Clean Up Britain. Yeah, Clean Up Britain in terms of the environment litter. But there's also this very strong headwinds to say that people, voters saying, let's clean up Britain. Yeah, let's clean up the politics. Let's clean up that. And I know, John, that we're all political nerds here. We're fascinated by politics and public policy. And I know we've had plenty of discussions around politics, public
over some lovely curries.
In Warwick in particular, around politics, around public policy, around the civil service. These are fundamental institutions in our country.
Yeah.
And the metaphor of around cleaning up Britain in your amazing campaign and you mentioned it there in terms of politics, public policy, civil service. What's the John Reid sort of diagnosis and the John Reid solutions on some of those issues? I mean, let's start with politics at the moment. And he was talking about the legacy parties have been in decline. And actually, we're following what Europe has had for many, many years. But in terms of why do you think that people are interested in politics, but the legacy parties appear to be in decline? And, leading psephologists like John Curtis has spoken about that ad nauseum. And do you agree with him? And what are the reasons that you think that people are losing faith and trust in politics at the local level and at the national level?
I mean, that's a big, big question with a lot of different strands to it. But it is interesting to draw the parallel. And if you look to France, say, for instance, the French Socialist Party basically went down the tubes after Hollande, Francois Hollande, who was president there and ended up being a figure of ridicule.
Yes.
As a result, the French socialists, which essentially, they've gone into an existential
crisis
nosedive.
Yeah.
They really have, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's interesting. Now, the question is that something that's going to be mirrored here? Now, I would hesitate to rush straight into making that sort of diagnosis or whatever, or prediction in relation to that. Other than to say, as we were saying earlier on, really, I think definitely there is a fraying of support, of traditional support for the Conservative and Labour Party. And now we're seeing both Reform UK and the Greens obviously picking up and being big beneficiaries of that. And is it for positive reasons? Who knows? Or is it just negative voting against the old parties? But just to try and be very precise about answering your question, I think, with the thing is now everyone in this country is an expert in politics.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone. It doesn't take, like Harris and I did, to do a politics degree at University of Warwick. We won't get into that, yeah? To say, I've got a politics degree, yeah? Whatever. Because you just get TikTok up, yeah? And there's somebody banging on about this, that and the other. And whether they know anything in reality is, let's say, highly questionable often, yeah? And without trying to be sort of elitist about it. But, they've got their view and everything. But I just think there's so much cynicism, isn't it, about politicians particularly. And I think a lot of problems that we have in this country do stem from the fact that our so-called leaders have not behaved like leaders.
Yeah.
I honestly think that, and I'm going to call out both Cameron and Johnson here. And I think a lot of the decay started with them, and without wanting to get into the minefield and blow ourselves up of Brexit, that whole, everything that's happened since then, whether you were in support of it or not. I mean, just the whole shenanigans around the Conservative Party. And dare I say it, is the Labour Party now in danger of repeating that process?
And it's really interesting because it's a credibility piece here, because you've mentioned France as well. And even Macron this week, he's out in Africa doing a big sort of partnership, trade type conversation. And actually, as a country, we're tied up in it's almost like celebrity news, isn't it? Who's going to be here this week and who's going to be there next week? And have we got some smear type picture to put in the news, because that's what sells, and it's our reputation.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And so in the West and East Midlands and nationally as well, we've seen that fraying of support for the legacy parties, if you want to call them that, and votes splintering in different directions, going to the Greens and to Reform. A couple of observations on there. If we are now moving to multi-party politics, is that a bad thing? In terms of, will that, in a counterintuitive way, force politicians and decision makers and the entourages around politicians to coalesce around how they can bring, certainly at a local level, collective benefit to a place rather than tribal party political reasons? Because, there's been coalition politics in most countries around the world. And they have a system. So they have a system around various degrees of proportional representation that accommodate that. We have a system called first past the post, and we have a multi-party splintering. Yeah. Those two things don't seem to me to go together.
No, but from a civil service perspective, so I geek out on civil servants. So Jeremy Haywood's book brings this out really, really well. His sort of post-humorous book is actually, for the civil service, coalition governments are actually a really bad thing, because there is nobody that's willing to take accountability for decisions. And actually you have to focus a lot of your time and energy collaborating. So you just can't get things done. So actually, if you start looking at the politics, and at the moment we've got a lot around devolution and actually getting power back down to grassroots back up, that actually if it was a coalition, you would end up with 6 parties debating the merits of that, much rather than focusing on the year or two to get it from, this is a concept that, we're going to go around and do all the policy briefing, to actually making it an act.
I think that's a really good point. I sort of come back to what John was saying about David Cameron and Boris Johnson in terms of, I'd like to explore that if we have time. But when you think the coalitions could prevent the sort of radical solutions in terms of the reforms that are required, deep-seated reforms required in our country, from happening. So if you look at like the past 50 years and look at the prime ministers that we've had, and again, this is not party political, the successful prime ministers that we've had in terms of being re-elected. So Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair. Yeah. Both election winning machines, very different. And both detractors, of course, but fundamentally changed the country. Yeah. So Margaret Thatcher, and we were at university at the time in the 80s, fundamentally changed the country. And Tony Blair came in and won 3 elections for his brand of third way politics that's bringing business and public sector together. And okay, there's a big debate around the Iraq War that made him very unpopular. But domestically, there was a number of key changes that have happened, starting from when Gordon Brown and the Bank of England, right until from the back. Yeah. So this, in living memory, this country has had significant growth, has significant politicians and governments who have enacted change. And yet the debates now at the moment is that Britain's become ungovernable. Do you see some optimism here, John, in that we have this current predicament? And you've charted it to David Cameron. I presume that was a not so coded response around Brexit and the referendum that it had. And then obviously Boris Johnson and what happened during COVID. And I mean, Lauren worked in government during COVID. And as it's becoming ungovernable, is it about personalities, or is it? I think it's always about policy, right? On it, and how do we get that radical spirit back that this country?
I just have a strong view on this. You might not agree with either view, but I just what I don't see in this country is visionary statesmen. And
all women.
All women, sorry. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Statesmen, stateswomen. Absolutely. What I see is just short-term parochial politicians all over the place. And what I mean by that, and when you say, what's the difference between a politician and a statesman or stateswoman? What the difference is, the statesman, stateswoman will look to the next generation many years in advance about where the country's going. Now, the trouble about that, as we all know in a democracy, is you've got 5 years.
Yes.
And then you get kicked out if the punters aren't pleased with you. And so, of course, that mitigates against that. But that's what we need now in Britain. I don't mean to put a big to kibosh people's optimism. But if you look at the fundamentals, and I'm amazed how most people don't understand the fundamentals about Britain's financial situation, which is dire.
Yeah.
Spell that out for the people who are watching this.
It's absolutely dire, but you will not. And this is where it takes a statesman or stateswoman to tell the truth. To tell the truth about our direction of travel, which at the moment is towards the buffers. And I'll tell you, and I'll explain a little bit about that, whatever. And these are just facts. These are not contestable. It doesn't matter whether you believe in Karl Marx or J.S. Mill or whatever, or who. So our economy is worth about £2.9 trillion in round terms, yeah? Or round terms 3, but about 2.9, yeah? And our national debt is basically the same. Yeah. So we owe about 2.9 trillion. So that's 99% debt to income ratio. Now, if you go back as far as John Maynard Keynes and his theory, you'd say that basically economies are not capable of functioning at anything over 70%. We're at 99%. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now that is only what's called our on-balance sheet debt. And this is the reason why Gordon Brown and Norman Lamont before him and others introduced what are called these PFI things, without boring people to death, public finance initiatives. We've got about 600 of those still left in Britain, yeah? And we're picking up the pieces from them because they're incredibly expensive to run. So in Birmingham here, the QE2 hospital.
Yeah.
The QE2 hospital, amazing hospital, and the rest of it, built by PFI.
Yeah.
It was the best part of £1 billion to build a hospital. Yeah. But that money that the government essentially borrowed, or it didn't because it was a private finance initiative, that's not on our debt ledger. So it's what's called off-balance sheet funding, yeah? So basically we've got £2.9 trillion of on-balance sheet that the government admits to, the British state admits to, yeah? But in addition to that, In addition to that, in modest terms, we've got another 1.3 trillion pounds of off-balance sheet debt. And those basically are made up of two things. PFIs, as I've just mentioned, the PFI initiatives, plus unfunded civil servant pensions, which is a huge issue. Huge issue.
It's what sunk the Romans, wasn't it? The pensions of the soldiers.
The pensions of the soldiers.
Really?
Yeah. But you see, I think this is really interesting. So pulling up the politicians that you mentioned earlier in terms of what was the success of Blair and Margaret Thatcher. And there's a lot of questions here of actually, has the state got too big?
Yeah.
You're talking quite a lot around, actually, we're sort of more multi-political. And why is that? And most people now are just taking the route of, I want systems change. I know something's got to change. And actually, if you speak to any politician, they're like, actually, the system's not working for me at the moment either. So it's this sort of unspoken secret.
The political system or?
The political system. So for politicians, they will go, actually, it's not delivering what I need to be an effective decision maker and somebody in power and out representing the country either. Any statesman or stateswoman that's got to come in now is probably facing for the first time, they're having to strip away something. And they're incredibly difficult decisions. You know, if you were Amazon or any other corporation coming in, looking at a service line.
Strip away spending.
Strip away services
strip away waste.
Or waste. Or, you know, for me, I would love to say, right, well, we've got student loans. We can create any system we want in the world. We could create one that's fun. Or what, and actually we've created, systems that make life incredibly difficult for people.
I think that's a really interesting analogy between business and politics. If you're running a business like Amazon, you don't have any sentiment at all. If you've got a loss making it, you just get rid of it, and you get it back to profitability for your shareholders. Yeah. Actually, the shareholders in politics are the voters. And
who aren't voting.
And politicians, their job partly, in terms of their own literally protecting jobs, is to get re-elected. Every 5 years.
That's what they're concerned about.
That's what they're concerned about.
And that's where the short-termism comes from, unfortunately.
And that's my point, is that the short-termism that hamstrings the country at large and hamstrings places like the East Midlands and the West Midlands, because politicians may come in with really powerful, motivating things. They want to make the country better, play a place better, but they need to get re-elected. So the limits of making unpopular decisions for the benefit of a place or a country, why do you want to commit political suicide if you're an ambitious politician? And one way around that possibly is to have an office for long-term planning, which is a bit like the decision on the Bank of England on the statute book. So out of political cycles, you're looking at the long-term horizon, as you said, John, and you're saying we've got this £2.9 trillion debt, which the figures are mind-boggling, right?
Absolutely mind-boggling. So nobody can get their head around them. They're that big.
And so that needs to be taken down. And there's another argument around, I know, views around the sort of welfare spend as well in this country. But fundamentally, I think Lauren spoke about system reform on politics, but it's actually system reform in thinking about places as well. So if you want to make Birmingham or the West Midlands or the East Midlands successful, you've got to make some pretty radical decisions, and then you've got to have the leadership to take those through and say, I'm making some difficult decisions, and that can be as a politician or as a big business and whatever, but this is for the benefit of the long term.
Yeah. You see, and I'll go one step further because I'm a bit more of the sort of, actually, how do we do that deliberative democracy?
Yes, absolutely.
And that citizens' engagement.
Yeah.
And actually, we've got some really big, crunchy decisions to make, like the assisted dying bill, for example, that was kind of kept quite close in the political system. If you're going to have to look at removing service lines, and actually you've got to sort of really rethink the way in which money is spent, actually start bringing the citizens along a little bit. And I probably challenge a little bit more on the East Midlands, because I don't think it's in the same situation as the West Midlands here, because actually we've got Rolls-Royce is flying, Alstom is flying, Toyota is flying. There's a Team Derby. We're getting a lot of influx in terms of 10 million for that. We've got the Broadmarsh. We've got actually quite a lot of infrastructure. We didn't end up with HS2, but actually, and we didn't have elections. No, and we haven't had elections either. So we're relatively steady for the next year.
Yes.
And actually, what is that going to do in terms of bolstering the region?
Investment and growth. And you mentioned those like 3 letters, HS2, or 2 letters and a number on it. And again, I know, John, you and I have spoken about this a lot around it. But fundamentally, your prognosis is that the debt is a huge issue and it's not going to be solved overnight. So there's a need for courageous leadership and radical leadership.
Yeah.
And being honest with the public about it.
Being honest, because any of the things that you talk about, I mean, obviously a lot of the money goes into the West Midlands, East Midlands, whether it's the mayors, it comes down from central government. Yeah, a lot of it. Obviously it comes from central government. And basically central government, whoever it's run at the moment, is going bust. And it really is. So we are in and people need to understand this really. And they understand that the real limits of the sort of elastic band of finance that the government's got, because it's not far off breaking. And there are some very difficult decisions really we've got to make. We're spending far too little money on defence, for instance. You see the state of the world at the moment. Our armed forces are as poorly funded as they ever have been. And starting on the Conservatives and Labour are continuing it, basically. That's just one area. But if you look at our debt, so I know this is getting down to the money, but without money, you can't do anything. You can't do anything. So, I mean, last year, our interest payment reservicing figure was £108 billion. So it's over £2 billion a week. Now, in case people are thinking, well, what's that got to do with me? What it's got to do with you is that every single citizen in Britain, including the baby who's born today, has £45,000 worth of debt. That's your share. That's your share of the debt. Lauren, 45,000, 45,000. That's how much we all owe, yeah?
Yeah.
And Rachel Reed said this, and she's right. There's nothing radical and progressive about having such a huge debt. And again, this shows you how we're basically living in a land of delusion, both the Conservatives and Labour and the political elite, because our 4th highest level of central government expenditure is just reservicing. It's just paying the interest on our national debt. So you've got welfare. Yeah, you've got welfare to do with it. You've got education, social security, and then you've got basically the debt. Much bigger than transport, much bigger than defence, much bigger than everything. So we should actually in Cabinet, and I would argue for it, but it'll never happen, we should have a Secretary of State for debt relief. Just to remind people, we're paying £108 billion. That was last year, by the way. Last year. So I checked this morning, because of the turmoil going on at the moment in Westminster generally. So Britain's borrowing, our debt costs for borrowing money have now on 10-year gilts, so on 10-year government bonds, is now 5.1%. France is 3.9%. Italy's even lower. That's a massive, it's a chasm difference. So in other words, the markets are pricing in Britain looks like it's going bankrupt. .com. Honestly, that's how serious it is. Now, you don't hear that political narrative at Westminster. You really don't. Partly because they don't want to spook the markets anymore. But this year, we will repay, my prediction, and hold me to it in the year, whatever, is that Britain will pay nearly £140 billion worth of debt just on interest. And last year was 108 billion. Yeah. And it's still the 4th highest level. So until we get that out under control, that is all that's money that we might as well have just chucked in the bin. Could be used on anything. Until we get that under control. And there's only 2 ways of that, of course. One is you grow the economy. Our economy's been flatlining for 20 years under the 2 old party system.
But the stock market's increased. The stock market's like grown by 20% a year. The stock market,
yes, but I'm talking about generally if the economy obviously is not growing and the government's tax take is not growing in any way. What has grown massively, and it's because, as you were saying earlier on, one of the 3 main drivers has been the 2008 financial crash. Then there's been then there's been COVID and Brexit. They're the three huge shocks to the system, which have really stacked on Britain's debt. It wasn't like this. It was like 35% back in the early 2000s, But we're now, basically almost fully loaded with it. Not as bad as France, by the way. France about 112%, And Italy's even worse than that. But our borrowing costs are massively more than those countries because the financial markets, and this is where somebody like Andy Burnham, dare I say, really just, he betrays a complete lack of understanding of the markets when he turns around and say, we don't want to be in hock to the markets. Well, funny enough, Andy, we already are. We already are because we owe them billions and billions. So unless you want Manchester going bankrupt overnight, you're going to be in hock to them. It's like, funny enough, when you have a mortgage from a bank, you're in hock to that bank because you owe them £300,000. Use that emotive language if you like, but it completely deceives the public, really. Basically, there's not enough money in the system. And, some people won't like this, but, and I just don't, I have no confidence about this, but the welfare bill needs serious analysis because all the signs on the welfare bill are that it will genuinely bankrupt this country. And that is my prognosis, unfortunately. And that's built on financial fact, stats. I know there's lies, damn lies and everything, but I challenge people, go and have a look at the Institute of Financial Studies, Institute of Government, whatever you want to have a look at. These are facts really about, I'm not making it up that we paid £108 billion last year in interest. And
I think the way you said it is very, very visceral because the baby born today owes £45,000.
Like everyone else.
So let's talk about something else that I think
it's not very optimistic and uplifting, is it?
Let's talk about something else that has vexed you, that impacts on, say, the West Midlands and arguably nationally as well, is HS2. Oh. Obviously great, and we're not far from it here in Digbeth where we are. Obviously great for Birmingham.
Great for Birmingham.
Great for Birmingham. Is it great for the country? And is it great for connectivity between east and west?
Well, you know what I'm going to say, of course.
Yeah.
I think it's the biggest capital disaster Britain's ever indulged in. It's the biggest single expenditure ever undertaken by the British state. More so than the Polaris, the whole nuclear sub-program. I'm not being, clever after the fact, but 18 years ago, I predicted it would be.
We had a conversation.
18 years ago, I predicted the final bill would be well over 100 billion. That's when the civil service, dare I say it, where there was coming out with figures of 28 billion in the Department of Transport. Some of the people in there I'm afraid I have got an issue with
they
the
do
service.
liaise with private contractors. They don't. It's not necessarily the civil servants designing it. They are. They are reliant on.
I can quote. Sorry, we're going to cross swords here slightly or whatever. But I can tell.
Let's cross swords.
When the Department of Transport officials, one of their first statistical models was absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It was less no-level standard stuff on economics. It was the Idiot's Guide to Economics, where they were saying basically they were pricing in no capacity, no productive time being spent on trains by people who travelled on trains, which is one of the reasons to get a train quicker because you're wasting less time then if you're sitting on a train. And of course, that's the time when we've all got laptops and everything. Everyone nowadays, of course, is working all the time on laptops. It's productive time. But sorry, that's just one thing. There are many, many things. But look, and I'm not blaming it all the way down to the civil service, but they undoubtedly are culpable. They undoubtedly are culpable with the whole system, along with private contractors who are massive vested interest in HS2, who have made billions from it, and who I know personally have funded lobbying campaigns to basically hoodwink gullible, stupid politicians, of which there are many at Westminster, in both the Conservative and Labour Party, that it was a great idea for Britain. It was not a great idea for Britain. It never was. What was a great idea for Britain was absolutely capital infrastructure. And the East Midlands has been stitched up completely because nobody cares. They don't care.
There's a lot to sort of unpack.
Sorry, Lauren.
No, there is actually. And I'm not saying I disagree either on some of these things. So HS2 is interesting because actually you hosted some sandpits the other day.
Yeah.
And actually somebody turned around and said, I'm really worried about which way the traffic to and from Birmingham will flow, which is quite interesting from a people perspective, because actually is it just going to result in more people going to London and spending in London, which is a thing that I sort of worry about from my place-based perspective.
Good point.
I've even seen in the East Midlands alone, like the first quarter this year, £20 million has been spent on corporate services consultancy just within the East Midlands. Really? But it's ended up going to the London ecosystem. And fair enough, we've got to work across and competitively and draw in the experts, but we've got to start building that expertise. But then there's the other bit in terms of
sorry, when you say it's gone back to London because of what, the London-based companies?
London-based companies have been commissioned to deliver it. Yeah. So all of that £20 million goes to employing people there. The profits, those people get to buy houses in London and go to the cinema in London and eat in London. And actually, there's no spend then that ends up resulting back, but also it doesn't come down to the communities. So I was speaking to, they were delivering quite a lot of looking at transforming the sort of the SEND system for children, and actually the people that were sort of looking at that corporate service transformation for SEND had no idea how it operated within the sort of local communities. But then on civil servants and on that side, they should be conveners and they should be there to look at things like equity. That's what we sort of want them for as sort of taxpayers. And I suffer very similar in terms of what you're talking about in terms of infrastructure, is that actually we see a lot of civil servants looking to come in and get down into community systems and grassroots communities that don't trust them. And they're going, right, I've got £10 million, so I'm going to employ 20 civil servants to deliver it. And so that, for me, you can see places are hurting from when actually almost the state is expanding too much, much rather than actually focusing on getting the money down into the communities to make the actual change.
I think that's a really great way to what you've said, Lauren, and what John's speaking about, the sort of narrative in the state of the country, because what you're essentially saying is that in terms of procurement, and something that we spoke about earlier on, is and absolutely the frustration that you've expressed. In the East Midlands, there's lots of really great organisations who have got a history with local communities and know the system. Why procure outside the region when you've got organisations who are trusted by local communities and there's an ecosystem there? That just sends out completely the wrong signal, in my view, on it. And it's the same thing in Birmingham and the West Midlands. No one's denying the fact you need to get best value for money. But when there's infrastructure, when there's organisations in the city here, work with them, work and invest in them. And I think linking it in terms of it's almost that policymakers and politicians do not have confidence in their own regions. So they need to have import that expertise from elsewhere. And sometimes you do. But in Birmingham, which is my home city, I've been away and I've come back. And I think it's the same with Roots and Futures in the East Midlands, is what we're trying to do is catalyse the talent already in place, enable people to stop working in a fragmented way and joining up these coalitions of interest that can then mobilise investment to come in. And the partnership with the civil servants, actually, that I've seen with Forward, has been very enlightened and very progressive, because they have knowledge capital and they're sitting on budgets, but they want to work with trusted organisations to enable them to have an impact in terms of the macro programs that they have. And going back to your point, John, about politics and policy and fragmentation, unless you have that smart level of working, which is pretty straightforward, actually, then you're always going to lose trust with people. And that's why, like Lauren's organisation, Roots and Futures, is so critically important.
And And
there's challenges.
Yeah, and to be fair, the legislation has changed.
Yes.
It's just the action isn't switching on quick enough, or people haven't felt empowered enough to go, well, actually, I sit in these procurement systems. I'm going to be a little bit brave and support those people locally to take advantage of that. We've covered a huge amount. And I'm sort of like thinking, actually, let's get to talking about what are those 3 things that you want to do radical change wise. Just to sort of conclude and wrap up.
In the country.
3 things that you could change, ideally to the Midlands, but you've talked everything from welfare to defence to cleaning up.
We've had a wide-ranging chat, haven't we?
We have. So, John, it's over to you. You can close us out.
Plenty more things we could talk about, really. Gosh, a magic wand and everything. I mean, yeah. I always tend to look at things from a national perspective. And one thing I do like when I hear from Keir Starmer, and maybe there's not that many, but one of them is it should always be country before party. I don't want to see tribalism in Britain in any respect. And maybe that's why I've actually, despite the fact, as Harris well knows from knowing him 40 years, very political person, but I've never been a member of a political party. Mm. I've done 2 consultancy projects for 2 political parties, but they paid me for them quite well in one case. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Because, of course, life is not black and white, is it, Lauren? It's not black and white. And we all know from all our experiences, there are good people in every party and lots of lunatics as well. Yeah. I've been to about 28 political conferences.
Right.
28 or 29 party political conferences. I had to stop going in the end, really, just because I was getting very suicidal. And to all of them, from SNP to Plaid Cymru to Labour, Conservatives, SDP, Liberals, I'm that old, whatever, yeah. And you sort of see that alike in the people who are there and everything. Anyway, but yeah, so look, the whole political system is, it's full of people who would probably go into politics for the right reasons. Yeah, for the right reasons. But actually, as you sort of alluded to, it is difficult to make change at sort of a speed that people want to see, if you like. But also, is it not very easy to fall back onto that word change? Mm-hmm. We don't always need to change everything. There is the bath water and the baby syndrome and all the rest of it. Not everything needs to be changed. Now, look, when it comes to elections, one thing is as clear as night follows day. The opposition party is going to run on the basis of we're here for change. Yeah, that's what they're going to run, whether it's America or here and everything. Yeah, it's literally everything needs to be changed. Everything's bad and all the rest of it. And it's not. We do need a little bit more of a reflective sort of lens to look through and think things. There are some things working well and some things there aren't. But I think people need to be given, honestly, I think the electorate, what I would like to see, and I just don't see it, is, as I was saying earlier, I want to see statesmen and women who will have the guts to tell the truth. Mm. Now, you might think that's turkeys vote for Christmas, because you know what? The truth isn't very palatable.
But I mean, I would say, I'm interested for the second and third points, but I would say if I was the politician locally and nationally, the one thing I would want to be above all, or perceive that is to be authentic and honest, because that's one of the reasons that people are losing faith with institutions.
I agree.
Because people think they've been taken for a ride and taken for idiots and
lied to
and
made promises that never come to fruition.
And in work and in outside work in our person, one thing that people do not like is being taken for idiots and being lied to. Yeah. Because that's a breakdown of trust. Yeah. And so therefore, if I was an aspiring politician locally and nationally, I'm going to say, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell it as it is. And I'm going to level with the people. And this is my campaign. It's a radical campaign, but we need to do it. Because, when that's happened recently in big elections, like in New York City, when an outsider, Mamdani, had that campaign, a very grassroots campaign, where she mobilized. Admittedly, he wanted transformation and change as well, as you said, John. But that's what happens. It's like if you level with people, level with voters, be honest and say, this is my manifesto. This is what I want to do. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult, but we'll get there. but we need to do this, then I think you could be onto a winner. But the second and third points, John, let's not lose sight of that. This is the John Reed manifesto for.
I mean, I endorse what you're saying about the authenticity thing. I think because the trust in politics has been really badly damaged across the political spectrum.
Yeah,
really. And if you look at some of the prime ministers we've had in the last 20 years.
Well, you mentioned two, didn't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I've got a pretty damning view on Boris Johnson, that's for sure, in everything. I mean, I just think he's a craven narcissist. He would do anything that basically benefited him, including selling his country down the tubes. And that's my view. A lot of people won't necessarily agree. I'm not saying he wasn't an intelligent guy and everything, but yeah. And then we get into the whole Brexit thing and all the rest of it about promises that have been made and maybe have not come quite to fruition in the way that the promises were. Yeah. So
some people say Brexit is the biggest suicide note a country can deliver to itself.
We all know.
There was a different environment there at that point in time, because I think there's always again, the country got to a point where actually almost it wanted to see the world burn.
That's a good.
And the Cameron have been spending a lot of time, if I remember it, in terms of, I'm going to the EU, I'm going to negotiate something, and the EU was coming back and going, you're either a member or not. And
yes.
There's things there that were happening sort of, talking about having an EU army and, in the way that if you think about how people and culture was changing, nobody was in the mind space of we want a big army because we want a better world, And, there's a lot that's sort of come out of that.
I think Brexit could be like 3 podcasts, can't it?
It can. So let's get to the point. Quick fire out. Quick one for number 3, something that's an actual do, an actual action. And then we'll
an actual action for the whole country.
Not a sort of, we need to rebuild trust or we've got to get people to be trustworthy. Honesty's hard because what you've said is, because if one politician stands up and be authentic, you've also got to ask everybody to do that. And that's not the way humans work.
Look, I don't know if I can say 1, 2, 3, but basically what I'd like to see is I just want somebody we need a statesman or woman who levels about how bad the situation is in Britain in terms of the finances of the country.
Yeah.
Honestly, they're bad.
Yeah.
And I'm a semi-macroeconomist. I know a bit about this, but you don't have to be to realise it. So the constant calls for spend more money on this, spend more money on that. There is no more money. There is no more money. There is no magic tree. There is no magic money tree. We're already living well beyond our means in this country already. We talked about servicing the debt. There's nothing progressive, as even Rachel Reeves said, about paying £108 billion a year to the financial markets to just service our debt, far less paying any of it back. People need to know that what I see out there is absolute fantasy economics from people like Zach Polanski. He has no idea about anything when it comes to finances. He doesn't realise. I really just genuinely think the guy just doesn't realise. And I think there are many other politicians like that. I know there are in Westminster. They haven't got a clue, saying spend money. Look, these are the easy solutions. There are no easy solutions from Britain. What we need is somebody who's willing to take the hard choices. And that involves making huge cuts to particular elements of spending, particularly welfare. Britain's welfare bill is out of control. Its direction of travel is even worse. If we don't do that, one of 2 things will happen. The country generally will go bankrupt. The international markets will withdraw funding from Britain. That's why our interest rates are so high for our debt at the moment. We will go to the IMF and we will not get the bailout from the IMF that we got in the 1970s because Britain's debt now is so huge, it exceeds the amount of money the IMF's got. That will happen. One of those 2 things will happen. And that is what will happen. There'll be a complete breakdown in trust. And that'll be even with the financial markets. I mean, we're already seeing it with all the political turbulence. But somebody needs to explain that to the average punter sitting there in Darlington or whatever on their settee. They need to understand the severity of the situation. That requires real courage and guts. And even if one person in one party is willing to do that, they'll probably lose the whip because, they'll say, you can't say that. It's a little bit like saying at the moment, so Kemi Badenoch is professing that Britain is not broken. I think by all measurements, it is actually broken. But you know the reason she won't say that? She won't say that because we've just had 14 years of Conservative Party rule. So the question is, well, you broke it then. So there's no honesty there.
Yeah.
So I'm giving the right and the left a bashing. And because we need genuinely, I think my big hope, we need a new form of politics in Britain. We genuinely do, beyond the rhetoric we do. And that involves, by the way, serious restructuring of the civil service, which I think has a lot to blame. I know you won't. Absolutely.
Well, no.
There's not enough accountability. There's absolutely not enough accountability in the civil service. And from what I've seen, I haven't worked at the Cabinet Office much and where you were, but the departments I have worked, Department of Communities, Health, DEFRA, I mean, some of this, God, it's uninspiring. Oh, really? Or whatever. And you know, so in other words, when I say, basically my final thing is to say the political elite in Britain has betrayed Britain. And that's the two main parties and the civil service, in my mind. There are other elements as well. There's a plethora of think tanks and everything. But many of the things that happened in this country have not been necessarily voted for by anybody.
John, so thank you so much for your... As ever, it was a nice, quiet discussion without any controversy at all.